On this episode, getting the lot layout right to get streetscape bioretention systems to fit in the landscape properly. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. Today, we are talking about how you go about designing streetscape bioretention systems, and specifically, how you go about getting the lot layout right so that those bioretentions fit neatly into the urban fabric. So they look like they're meant to be there, so they take up as little space as they need to, but that they add these aesthetics and this amenity that we want them to. So, we have touched on this subject a little bit before. We touched on it back in episode 70, but today we're going to go into a little bit more detail, particularly as to why it's important to get the lot layout right. Because the foundation of this video is the fact that if you are designing streetscape bioretention systems as a part of a new development, you need to consider where those bioretention systems are going really early on in the design process before the lot layout is fixed. So, where this video is going to add and build upon the last one is we're going to look at explicitly and specifically why it is that that's so important and the different outcomes that happen when you get that wrong. And then we'll go into a couple of techniques as to how to get that lot layout right and get things happening the way they should. So for this episode, we're actually going to go over to the laptop. We're going to have a look at a few different things here on the screen capture. So let's go do that now. What you can see on the screen here is we've got Google Maps up, and this is Caloundra. This is on the Sunshine Coast, so just north of Brisbane, like an hour north of Brisbane or thereabouts. See Caloundra itself. But what we're actually interested is over here, this little area here. This development that I'm circling now with the mouse is Belle Vista. Now it's a really well recognized, high profile water sensitive urban design case study from the earlier days of water sensitive urban design in southeast Queensland. But right next door, so this whole area down in this direction is ultimately going to develop. And what we've got here, right next door, is Bells Reach, which is the most recent version of that. And we've got a really interesting compare and contrast here, because Belle Vista, the earlier one, the streetscape bioretention systems that are in there are really well integrated into the urban fabric and were considered really early on in the design process. The newer stuff at Bells Reach were not, and the outcome is not as good. It's not terrible. In many respects, they've done a surprisingly good job with this stuff, considering the fact that they were inserted into the urban fabric late in the design process. But yeah, it's a great compare and contrast because the topography, the climate, the terrain, the geology, everything is the same here. They are literally hundreds of meters apart from each other. So it's a great compare and contrast. So let's first zoom in and we'll look at Belle Vista. So we'll come over here to Feathertop Circuit and we'll look here. So it's this little region here that we're looking at. There's actually streetscape bioretention all through all these streets around, but we're just going to focus on this intersection. Because what's done really well throughout this development is every time there's an intersection, you see all these T's, there's a lot of T's, there's a little cornery sort of a T thing here. Every time there's a T, you find 3 streetscape bioretention systems. 1 at the top of the T and 2 on either sides. So if we actually grab the little man and go into Street View, we can have a look at this. So what we have here, let's just get my bearings. Yep, here we go. Okay, so this street here is the top of the T. This street behind us is the upper right of the T. So we've got 1 bioretention system at the top of the T here, and we've got 1 on the edge of the T, another on the other edge of the T. And so what I really like about this is firstly that there's not a huge number. It's just 3 systems at each T intersection. It's not like there's 1 scattered every few houses up and down the street. 2, the aesthetics have been done pretty well on here. So, you know, the surrounding planting's really nice. There's some trees in there. I think there's some Banksias in this. You know, it looks really neatly done in here. Yeah, and over to this one here. Also looks really nice. Now I should say, anyone who's familiar with the local area here will be going, wait, Belle Vista, aren't there some problems with those systems and not being any plants in the filter media anymore and it's just the plants around the edge are left? Yeah, that's actually a really valid point and really true. And while that's not the subject of this video, I'll make it the subject of the next video. I'll talk a little bit about that then that there, but that's a functional, why aren't these systems working and why aren't the plants surviving issue, more so than it is a how do we locate these systems in the urban fabric. So you get the impression here of what these three systems look at the top of the T. Let's now just go for a little squiz down this road. So as soon as we go down the road here, you can see, much like any other normal road, there's curb and channel down either side. There's plenty of nice wide grass footpaths. No paved footpath on these streets, which does mean that it's a little bit easier to fit these systems in over here, because you're not trying to fit a footpath up the verge as well. You're just trying to get the services round with them. But you can see that. So we keep going a bit further up the street. Again, nice and clear, not too many of these systems by any means. And we get up to the next intersection, and then we've got one on this corner here. It's only one as we turn the corner, so that's not overtaking the urban fabric by any means. And we zoom up heaps more, zoom up, we skipped quite a few houses there, and then we get up to the next T intersection, and we see it again here. In this instance, there's one on this corner, and there's one on the top of the T, and there's not one on this side of the T, but there's one just up here at this next corner around. So you can see, like, there are a fair few in the urban fabric, but there's not heaps. So that's Belle Vista. Let's, for a second, zoom back out. There we go. Zoom out a little further. And now let's go across to Bells Reach. Bells Reach this stuff was not considered as early in the design process. And, whoops, I'm trying to drag the wrong thing over to get there. There we go, drop the little man. This is the difference here. Bells Reach, the lot layout was set first, and then the bioretention system's been put on later. So you can see one here that's at the top of the T. Well, that fits with the Belle Vista approach to things. But then, if we spin, come back a little bit here. So there's that one at the top of the T. What you can start to see here now is we've got these little higgledy-piggledy systems jammed in between the different houses, in between the driveways. They're really quite small systems. They're, they just don't quite seem to fit in quite the right way. And this is the difference between the two sites. The fact that because of some stuff that was done early on in the lot layout at Belle Vista that I'll show you about in just 1 second, suddenly there was not enough room to put a smaller number of larger streetscape systems, because Belle Vista has less systems, but they're bigger. There wasn't the space to do that. There wasn't the uninterrupted is the key word here. There wasn't the same uninterrupted space to put in those systems when they got over to Bells Reach. So what suddenly starts to happen is they've got to jam little systems in amongst the driveways and the like. So you come around to this intersection and okay, over here it doesn't fit too badly. There's a bigger system. But because they've been chasing their tail and being like, oh, we can't quite get our treatment objectives in some spots, they've been then ending up jamming little systems in all over the spot. Now, why is this actually a problem? Because arguably you go, well, lots of planting in the streetscape, that's actually quite a nice thing. There are a few problems with doing this. The first one shows up really nicely in this system under our nose here. And that's it. Look at that. There's maybe a couple of square meters of filter media here. And because this was jammed in late in the process, they've had to put an outlet pit in. They haven't just been able to use a gully pit that was already in the streetscape, whereas if you'd got the lot layout done, if you'd thought about this early on in the lot layout, you could have also chosen where you put gully pits into the street, and you could just use the gully pit in the street in conjunction with this inlet here. They haven't done that, so late on in the piece, they've had to drop an extra pit into here, and the pit's really quite big relative to the filter media. That's very inefficient. Then you've got all this landscaping around the edge. That's really inefficient. And on top of that, it takes up, apart from the driveway frontage, it takes up the entire frontage of this house. So imagine you're this resident and you have a friend over. You have barely just enough room for that friend to park in front of your house. And imagine it's raining and they go to get out of their car. Well, they got a passenger because it's on the left, and you should only, in Australia, only park on the left, and that's the passenger side. Passenger goes to get out, and guess what? They step straight into this inlet that's all wet. This stuff gets in, can be a bit awkward in terms of getting in the way of parking if it's right out front of people's houses. Now, it doesn't seem to matter. If there's just a few of them scattered around the place, it doesn't matter because, well, instead of parking here, you could park, next. But, oh, hang on, look at this little street here. There's literally nowhere on this side of the street to park that isn't in front of a driveway or a rain garden, or a driveway or a rain garden, driveway, tiny bit of turf, can't park there, rain garden, oops, it's a corner, can't legally park there either. Because of these systems, you can't legally park on this side of the road, and not risk stepping into a rain garden when you get out of your car. So it's just not quite so desirable. The other problem that pops up here, and I'll demonstrate this with PowerPoint, with really small systems, is they're inefficient with batter areas. So imagine what we've got here, is we've got a really small system like we were just looking at, and that's the filter media area. Just imagine it's 1 meter by 1 meter, just to demonstrate my point here. I get that that one's actually a little bigger than that. Now, imagine that that system is 300 mils deep. Maybe that's a little deep for a streetscape system, but this will just make the maths nice. And it's got roughly 1 in 3 batters. Well, that means that for every 100 mils that we come down, we have to go 300 mils out. So that means that the batters end up being about 1 meter wide in every direction. So we've got 1 meter by 1 meter filter media and 1 meter out in every direction of batters. What that means is that the batter area is 8 times the size of the filter media area for this really small system. Now, it's not going to be quite that extreme for a system that's 2, 3, 4 square meters, but you get the point. And so then we go, okay, like in the last situation, we go 2 small systems like we have here, and imagine that there's a driveway in the middle. Well, that's also really inefficient with batter areas. But then think back to Bell Vista. Think back if you could redesign the lot layout so that instead of having lots of tiny systems like this, you could have a few bigger ones. They're still small compared to a basin, right? They're still only going to be in like the 20 square meters sort of range. But imagine what happens if you have that. Let me highlight this and demonstrate what happens. So you can see me here. I'm going to drag, you can see it going, dragging this across. Okay, we're getting close. I'm going to butt those 2 filter media areas up against each other. Coming across. Hey, look, the batters are overlapping. Oh, look at this. Filter medias are coming together. How much of that batter's overlapping? Filter medias are joined. Now let's counterweight around this. So we have 2 square meters of filter media in the middle, and then batters are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 square meters. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Suddenly, instead of a ratio where the filter media was 1/8 of the, well, 1/9, there was 8 square meters of batter to 1 square meter of filter media. Now we have a situation where there's only 5 square meters of batter to 1 square meter of filter media. So it's just much more efficient overall. So from a developer's point of view, you should be like, sweet, we're getting some land back. So these are all the reasons why it's really important to take the time early and to get the lot layout right so that we can get streetscape bioretention systems. Now, streetscape systems are always going to be small, but we can get them as big as possible, noting that they're still streetscape systems. I can remember having a conversation to Leon Rowlands, and I'm going to get the exact, from Switchback 48, I'm going to get the exact numbers wrong here, but he explained to me a little case study that inspired by Bell's Reach that he had done at one point, where he was like, okay, let's take that area and go back to the drawing board and just try and figure out what we could have done in that space if we had a bit of flexibility with the lot layout. Not even massively changing the roads, just fiddling around with a little bit of stuff. And I think he said to me that he could have dropped the number of systems. Now obviously they're going to be bigger, but as we just saw, a smaller number of bigger systems is still more efficient in terms of batter area and space. I think he said that he felt that he could have cut the number of systems by like 60 to 70%. So only having 1/3 of the number of systems at the end by getting this right. That's a significant saving, right? It's a lot less hassle. It's a lot less of those random pits to install that cost money. It's a lot less batter area to be building. There's definite benefits with this. So let's look at what actually works. What is it that you need to do early on in the lot layout to get this right? What we'll do is we'll skim back out of here. We'll get rid of the aerial photograph. We'll zoom out a little and we'll go back over to Bell Vista. Bell Vista, we're coming back across the Feathertop Circuit. This is where we were before. And the first thing is, let's zoom in nice and close. Now just look for a minute at this lot layout here. Actually, that's a little bit too close for you. There we go, that's a little better. Let's just look at this lot layout, noting that the bioretention systems are here, top of the T, and here, either side of the T. What can you notice from that about the lot layouts, the property boundaries that might be helping here? Have a think. Okay, let's talk about it.
what's been done really neatly here at this T intersection is you can imagine, let's move the map a tiny bit, that we can see on Feathertop Circuit here that there are 3 blocks lined up like so, facing onto Feathertop Circuit. It would have been really quite easy when this street was designed. It would have been really quite easy for these end blocks here just to be lined up in the same direction as all the others. But of course, what would have happened if you'd done that is where the bioretention system is sitting here on this long side, which fits in with the grades and the topography, is that you would have suddenly had a couple of driveway crossovers here, which means you wouldn't have uninterrupted, we're back at that word, uninterrupted space here, to put in the nice long bioretention system that they had. So the first thing that's been done really neatly on this particular site is the fact that they've made sure that the blocks on the sides of the T are oriented such that there's this long uninterrupted space here to put the bioretention system in. It hasn't particularly changed like the road layout or anything like that, but it's given this space so the bioretention system goes down the side of the block. And that's really important because it gives A, the uninterrupted space, but it also means that for the resident who's going to access over here through the front of the block, if a friend comes over and wants to park, they can park there and there's not going to be any bioretention system to step into. And at the same time, this beautiful bioretention system that we saw at the start here with lots of trees is providing all this nice shade and screening off their side boundary, where it's likely perhaps that they might have a little patio or something like that out here. So it's win-win-win-win in that situation. And the one other thing that's been done is you can just see how these 3 blocks here, the front of the property boundary is dead straight, and then there's just this slight indentation here, and that's just setting back the property boundaries a tiny bit wider, making the road reserve a tiny bit wider where the bioretention system is, just to give it just enough room to fit the services in there, and that's it. It's these subtle changes that allow this to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, Belle Vista is in a particularly good situation for this because it's a relatively large development. The bigger the development is, the more flexibility there's going to be because you have opportunities to go, oh, okay, well, if we just, locate those blocks or orientate those blocks in those directions and then these in these directions, you can do this to make it work because you can see it being pushed around here. So this is the intersection we're looking at, 1, 2, 3. And then you can see, over here on this intersection, there was one there tucked into this corner, one at the top of this T and one over this side. So they've orientated this one so that it was up the long side over on Air Place. But this block here, where the bioretention system is not here, but it's actually around this corner, well, they've left that block sideways. There's a lot of thought put into every single one, but it ends up with a really good outcome that saves money in the long term. I recognize, however, that if you're on a small subdivision, if you're going like 1 into 7, 1 into 8, something like that, your opportunities for orientating the blocks in the right direction are less. So I get that the power of thinking about this early diminishes as the development gets smaller, but it doesn't go away completely. You definitely still have opportunities the earlier that you look at this stuff to go, okay, let's make subtle adjustments. This could be as subtle as making sure that, okay, if you can't orientate the blocks in the right or the wrong direction to make this happen, well, what we might do, so let's say if you decided that you had to put a bioretention system kind of wrapping around the front of this block here, well, what you could do is make sure that the driveway crossover is going to be at the top of this block so that you get as much room around the side of this as you can. Just little things like that can help even in smaller, more constrained developments. And so let's just show one more example of how this works, just kind of side by side. So what we have here is a hypothetical T intersection where on the left with the red X, we're showing a development where a lot of thought hasn't been put in and the blocks haven't been orientated in a particularly well thought out way. And on the right, we're showing one where they have, where the end blocks have been turned around and we've fitted in some bioretention system. And you can see exactly what goes on here. In the well-orientated direction, we have this nice long continuous bioretention system. I know we're showing on the left 1 and 2, and over here just 1, but I have accidentally drawn this one more than double the size. But anyway, nice one long continuous bioretention system here. It's down the side, not in anyone's way, doing really sweet, doing really nicely. Then over here what we have is the situation where, okay, didn't think about this, didn't orientate it. For some reason, because of the topography, like I get that in the real world, you might actually kind of stick this round over on this side here, but for the purpose of demonstration, you see what I'm getting at here. We don't have a nice long side to put the bioretention system where we need to, so it's got to be really short to avoid the driveway. This one block is set back in a strange manner. That probably wouldn't even happen in the real world. So in the real world, that would probably be jammed out, and this little thing would be even smaller. It wouldn't fit in really well. And then because of that, it's not big enough to meet the treatment objective. So a couple of blocks further up, there's another one jammed in and another setback. You can see how this spirals out of control just by thinking about this early on. The big green tick over on this side gets it right, aligns the blocks, sweet. Now I will just touch on one thing here. If you're being really astute, you'll count that on the left-hand side there are 8 blocks, and on the right-hand side there are 7. This is true. This is partly because I've accidentally drawn this bioretention system too long. If you were doing this in the real world, this bioretention system would be a little bit shorter to give the same treatment area that. That would mean these couple of blocks here were a little bit shorter. Everything would push up a little, and then there'd be room on either side here for like half a new block, and you'd actually end up with 10 blocks on this side. So it doesn't, like this that we're describing here does actually save development blocks. My sketch is just a little bit dodgy. Okay, and bringing it back to the camera. So that is a more detailed look at why it's just so important to get the orientation of bioretention systems right when we're doing lot layout, because it allows us to get these just much better outcomes. They're much better in terms of saving space. They're much better in terms of access to blocks. They're much better in terms of maintenance, because you have less batter area to maintain. You can put these systems beside the side fence of properties. Actually, the reason why now this is like one of these sample size of 1 things. No, sample size of 2. The reason why I think that's a good idea is I've had a couple of experiences out on site where I've been looking at bioretention systems right next to people's houses, and residents have come out and have talked to them about it, and in those experiences they have seemed much happier with the big planted area up their side than the big planted area in front of their house. It seems to be side where I don't go, plant it up as much as you want, I like the screening. Front where I do go, that's taking away my space, taking away my access, I'm not so keen on that. Okay, and that's it. I hope you found it interesting. As always with Ideanthro, if you have questions, you have things about water sensitive urban design that you are interested in and would like to know, maybe the history of why something's done the way it is, by all means hit us up. You can find us online a few different ways. You can find us at ideanthro.com. There's a contact us page there. You can get in contact that way. You can find us on YouTube, hit us up in the comments below. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Ideanthro. Sweet, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time to talk about why the plants aren't doing so well in the bioretention systems at Belle Vista.